Good morning, good morning, good morning. It is a beautiful, beautiful spring morning, and I welcome you here this morning. Well, down south it was spring in Hickman. We had a little white snow on the rooftops, but I guess that's called frost. But it is good to be here. It's good to see all of you here, my goodness sakes. Great to have you. I want you to take notice on the left board over there, those of you that can see specifically over on this side of the room. When I came in, I overheard some naughty talk, something about Penn State, and I was trying to ignore it, so I wrote on the board PU, and that doesn't mean Penn State University either. That's how bad it was yesterday, for those of you that know what I'm talking about. Someone asked me, a couple of you asked me, did Penn State play football yesterday? And they said, what happened to Penn State yesterday? And I said, well, they arrived, and that was about the best I could say for them. But what they're doing is they're playing a psychological game with Nebraska. They're playing down, so we think, here in Nebraska, not a problem next year. So. Anyway, good to see all of you. Wonderful to see you. Praise the Lord. This morning, what we want to do is we want to turn to Jeremiah chapter 27, if you will, please. Jeremiah chapter 27. Oh, I thought we finished Daniel. No, I want you to turn to Jeremiah 27:7. And I'd like for someone to read nice and loud as Celia comes by with the mic. Read 27:7 of Jeremiah, and we want to talk about that a little bit in relationship to Daniel. So if someone would like to just volunteer to read. Not everybody at once, please. Jeremiah 27:7. Jeremiah 27:7. Vern, go ahead, please.
So all nations shall serve him and his son and his son's son until the time of his land comes. And then many nations and great kings shall make him serve them.
Very good. Now, the reason I want you to read that's a prophecy by Jeremiah regarding what we started talking about last week, and we're going to review today and move on today in Daniel, regarding Nebuchadnezzar. If you go back a verse or two and start back about verse 4 of Jeremiah 27, it says something like this. This is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says. Tell this to your masters. With my great power and outstretched arm, I made the earth and its people and the animals that are in it. And I give it to anyone I please. Now that's a very important statement to remember. I give it, God says, to anyone I please. Now I will hand all your countries over to my servant Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. And I will make even the wild animals subject to him. And then we read on with what Vern read there. How that there will come a time, God said, there will come a time when I will actually make all nations rise above him, and he will become servant to them. Now we go back to Daniel, if you will, and we find here in Daniel what we come upon is the whole business in Daniel about the kingdoms. And if you notice if you will, in chapter 7 of Daniel, we're kind of jumping around here a little bit. Let's slip over to chapter 7, and as you look down through chapter 7, what you find, there's an identification made in terms of animals. And the animals are such as the lion, the bear, the leopard, and then Rome. The lion, the bear, the leopard, and then Rome. Now the lion, as we learned last week, the lion was representative of Nebuchadnezzar. He was the king. He was really recognized as king of all kings on the earth. Now, he wasn't king of kings like Christ, but he was king of all the kings on the earth at the time. He was the metal gold of the great statue. And he was looked at by all nations. Many, many nations were subservient to him. He had a great kingdom, and he was recognized as the lion in chapter 7. And then, of course, the bear was Persia. The leopard was Greece, or the Greco Empire. And then, of course, you had the 10-horned beast, which was recognized as Rome. And Rome lasted for about 1,000 years. Earl was bringing up some numbers this morning, and it's kind of interesting when you think about numbers in terms of years and in terms of empires. Then you think about our country, and we don't call our country an empire, but still we are a great nation. But if you read the news the other day in the newspaper, it was interesting. A comment was made, something to the effect that the western country of the United States or of America was beginning to lose its influence in the world. Kind of interesting to read a statement like that. Kind of scary, really. But we're looking here at Daniel, and we're looking now at the statue and the four metals. We had the gold, we had the silver, the bronze, and the iron. Now, I'd like for you just to kind of recall, last week we talked about this, but just a very quick review. Tell me, several of you just kind of share with the class, what is your concept of the four metals? Start with gold. Tell me what you understand about gold. Tell me anything you understand about gold. We know the elemental symbol is AU, but besides that, what do we know about gold? Anyone? Earl? I'm sorry?
They call it precious.
Very precious, exactly right. It is a metal which is very precious. It is a metal which kings and everyone in the world has always sought after gold. Back in the 1960s, early 70s, gold sold for $33 an ounce. I wish I had invested a little bit. Now it's worth over $1,000 an ounce. Very interesting. Something else, most precious. Earl, you were going to say something.
Well, I think the empire, Babylon was known as a golden empire. They had so much gold. They put gold on just about everything in that city. So it's known as a golden empire,
right,
in a sense.
That is exactly right. It was recognized as the Golden Empire. And you recognize gold has great luster to it. Yes, please.
This is an interesting thing about gold. In bad times, the price of gold goes up. And in good times, the price of gold comes down.
Yes. Yes, very well said. Yes, economically, that is correct. That's right. Okay, something else about gold. Think in terms of what we talked about last week. Gold, the kingdom of Babylon. Is gold, let me ask a couple questions here. Is gold the hardest metal? No, this young lady's saying no. Why do you say no?
Because gold is very soft.
It's very soft, that's correct. Gold is very, very soft. If you look at the ring on your hand or maybe around your, and you find that this is actually a metal, it is gold, but it's only like 18 karat gold. There's an alloy in there to make it hard. When we were in Indonesia, I tried to get a goldsmith to make a ring for my oldest daughter, and had a stone in it, a gem that she had obtained. And I said, I want it out of pure gold. And he said, I refuse. I said, why do you refuse? I'll pay you. He said, no, I refuse. He said, it would be way too soft. And then I realized, of course, it was too soft. Okay, how about silver? Tell me about silver. Someone tell me a little bit about silver. What was the empire?
It tarnishes.
It tarnishes, okay. It oxidizes very easily. Those of you that have pure silverware, well, you know you're always polishing that periodically. What was the kingdom? Silver was what kingdom?
Persia.
Persia, right, okay. Persia, Median, okay. What about silver? Silver is a metal. Harder, softer than gold?
Harder.
Harder. It's one of the best conductors of electricity. Okay, it's a very interesting substance, silver. Superior or inferior to gold? Inferior to gold, exactly right. Not quite economically not quite as good. This was the Persian Empire, remember, Cyrus the Great. He was the ruler at the time, lasted for approximately 500 years, no, not 500 years, about 250 years, 300 years, something like that. How about bronze? Tell me about bronze. You metallurgists, tell me about bronze. Bronze is composed of what? What materials?
Brass.
Brass?
Iron and tin, isn't it?
Iron and tin? Copper and tin.
Copper.
There you go.
Okay.
Very good. Okay. Bronze is a substance. It's a type of metal. And one of the things about, and of course we know Alexander the Great was the great leader of the empire at the time. He was recognized in the statue as the bronze. One of the things about Alexander the Great, if you remember last week, we talked about it, and we said Alexander the Great was a great military person. great general. He was a very great strategist. But he had a very inferior empire. And what made his empire so inferior was the lack of his lack of administrative abilities. He was a great warrior, a great army man, great general, and conquered a great deal of the known world, but his administrative powers was not very good, and he didn't have a very good support on that, so his empire failed. Then we come to iron. Now tell me about iron. What do we know about iron?
It is strong.
It is strong. Okay, what else? How strong, Roger, would you say it was according to Daniel? How did Daniel describe the iron in the statue? Anyone?
It was mixed with soil.
Okay, it was mixed with clay. All right, in the study here of Daniel, we find iron was mixed with clay. But let's talk about iron first. What does Daniel say about the metal iron in the statue? It would do what?
Hold up the rest of it.
Hold up the rest, yes. Crush all the rest, exactly right. He recognized, or he made us recognize, makes us recognize that iron was the metal that was so strong that it could crush all the other metals. Did it really do that as an empire? What was the empire? Rome was the empire. About 1,000 years. And we find that this particular empire, the iron clay empire, did last. It was powerful. It did conquer a lot of the land. It did make other nations subservient to them. They set up their government throughout all of their conquered world and so on. We know the whole story of Rome, or a lot of it. But one of the things that we find in Daniel here about the Roman Empire, or about the iron, John brought out, was the fact that it was mixed with clay. Now, why was that so important? Why does that become significant in our study? Iron mixed with clay, what happens to the iron?
Weakens.
Pardon me? Weakens it, makes it very brittle. Exactly right. The Roman Empire, again we find as we go through history, we find that the Roman Empire split. And it split into an east and west. And because of its split, we find this is the frailty. Now the question comes, why did it split? Why did it become such a frail empire? What caused, what characteristics, or what events within the empire period caused it to become a weakened nation, a weakened empire? We mentioned this just in the close of last week. Yes, Jim?
I believe Earl had some interesting comments last week concerning the infighting in the organization.
Okay, so we would say the iron became frail due to internal fighting. Okay, what else? Anyone?
They became disconnected with all that's around them. The lifestyles were different, and they would not agree to anything concrete to adhere together as a one unit or one nation.
Mm-hmm. Okay, very good. So you gave me two ideas then. Disunity among the people. Let's go back to this lifestyle that John mentioned. What was the lifestyle of Rome? Just anyone, just from your history days when you were in school. What was the lifestyle of Rome?
Pomp and ceremony.
Pomp and ceremony, very definitely that. Absolutely. Put a lot of emphasis on the recognition of the higher ups, the more wealthy. Very good. What else?
Immorality.
Immorality, absolutely. The lifestyle was one of immorality. Now, let me ask this question. Let's get right down to the rubber touching the road. What was immoral about their lifestyle? Pardon? Homosexuality. What else? When you get a picture in your mind of Roman life, You go to see a movie, Ben-Hur, or some of those others. I can't think of all the names of those old movies. But what was always depicted in the movie?
A lot of drinking.
A lot of drinking, a lot of party. They're a great party world. They would lie and recline, and they'd be eating the grapes and drinking the wine, and all the foolishness that went on in these parties. Does that ring a bell with contemporary times in the world? Absolutely. Absolutely. We are a world society of party, big time party, and it's being justified. Anytime we read about fraternity parties, et cetera, on the college campuses throughout all the United States, it's quite often the small print is justified, rationalizing why it is. It's being accepted more and more. So we look at this as far as Rome is concerned. And this is one of the problems. Now, let's take a look over in verse 34 of Daniel 2. Someone read that for me, if you will, please. 34, verse 34 of Daniel 2.
You continue looking until a stone was cut out without hands, and it struck the statue on its feet of iron and clay and crushed them.
Now, here we've been talking about the strength of each of the four metals. And now all of a sudden in verse 34, Daniel is making an interesting statement. He says, there will be a stone cut out of the mountain which will crush the empires. Now the question to the class is, we're going to use the word stone or rock. Some translations use the word rock. Question mark. What is the rock? What is the stone?
The stone is Christ comes into the world, and he says, they will hate you because of me. And our lifestyle and all that come to Christ during that time. This was the war between pride of life and all of the other against submission to a holy God and Savior. That there was a Savior that came into the world to save the world.
Right. You're suggesting, John, that the rock is symbolic of Christ having come from the mountain.
Yes.
What makes you think it's a divine origin? What is there in Daniel's remarks that make you think that? Anyone, not just John, anyone.
Without hands.
Randy?
Cut without hands.
Cut without hands, exactly right. This is the emphasis you want to pick up on here in this particular verse. There was a stone cut not by hand. And this is right away, most scholars will agree that this is in fact a description of an originated of a divine origin. And in this particular case, we're recognizing it as Christ. Just what John had said there, and exactly right. Now, is there anywhere in Scripture where it talks about the mountain being God's mountain? Is this the mountain that Daniel is referring to? Out of God's mountain comes the stone cut by hand. Or not cut by hand. And the answer is yes. Otherwise I wouldn't have asked the question, Louise. Why would I ask a question there's no answer to? It has to be a positive answer. In Isaiah 2:2, go back to Isaiah 2:2, if you will. In Isaiah 2:2, it reads like this. In Isaiah it says, and in the last days, the mountain of the Lord's temple will be established as chief among the mountains, and it will be raised above the hills, and all the nations will stream to it. And many people will come and say, come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord. And the thought here is that this stone that is being broadcasted here by Daniel is actually Christ. Christ came from the mountain of God. It's all symbolic, but he came from heaven. He came from God. And so the mountain is the concept here that we want to look at. Now, if we say that the stone is the Son of Man, or is Christ, then who will receive from the mountain of the Ancient of Days an everlasting kingdom? Where does it talk in Daniel about this stone or this empire, if we want to call it an empire or a kingdom? Where does it talk about this being an everlasting kingdom in Daniel 7? Can you find that for me in Daniel 7? Help you out a little bit there. As soon as you find it, read it to the class, please. It sounds a great deal like Thessalonians. Go ahead, please.
It says, I kept looking in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven, one like a son of man was coming. And he came up to the Ancient of Days, and was presented before him. And to him was given dominion, glory, and a kingdom, that all the peoples, nations, and men of every language might serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion, which will not pass away, and his kingdom is one which will not be destroyed.
Very good. In chapter 7, verses 13, 14, 15, right in there, it talks about this very thing. The fact that it is going to be an eternal kingdom. He goes before the Ancient of Days, and he is given this kingdom which will last forever. It will never be destroyed. There's nothing that's going to destroy it. So that's kind of interesting. And again, we begin to see the prophecy of Daniel, not only the history of what was going on at that time, but also going all the way back to Jeremiah. Jeremiah prophesied Nebuchadnezzar would lose his kingdom and so on. But now we see as we move on through Daniel, and I jumped you up there to chapter 7, but needed, because now we see this stone is Christ and his kingdom is going to be. It wasn't then, but it was going to be. This was even beyond Daniel's time. Look at go back again if you're still in chapter 7. Just take notice, if you will, an interesting point here. In chapter 7, closing out that verse 14 there, it says, and the kingdom is one that will never be destroyed. And notice verse 15, I, Daniel, was troubled in the spirit, and the visions that passed through my mind disturbed me. Why? Why would Daniel record his inability to understand and be disturbed about it? Why do you think? Just common sense, just natural thinking. If you were Daniel, go ahead, Earl, please. So,
well, I'm thinking he thought this was going to happen very quickly, and not something in the future. And of course, Gabriel comes down to straighten him out, to instruct him in that. So he knows that 70-year 70 years in Babylon is about over.
That's right.
And he is wondering what's going to happen in the future. And I put myself sometimes try to think about what he was thinking all through his life. And when he was younger and watched his country fall, it's about the same age I was when I thought maybe Hitler was going to come over here and take over this country. And I was wondering if there was some place up in the hills where I could hide.
Very interesting, yes.
Daniel had a lot more faith than I had. But talking about the stone, we know Christ is the stepping stone or stumbling stone. And in 1 Peter it says he's a living stone.
Right.
So,
right.
I don't know if I answered your question. I kind of walked around.
No, that's okay. That's good. That gives us another. Yes, Joe, please.
My Bible has a footnote on chapter 2, verse 35, and it refers to Matthew 21:44, right, which is Christ teaching the parable of the tenants. And I'm going to read verse 33 as well, because it kind of ties in.
Very good.
Christ is talking now. Therefore I tell you that the kingdom of God will be taken away from you and given to a people who will produce the fruit. So in other words, if you don't deal with it right, you'll take it away and give it to somebody else.
Right.
He who falls on this stone will be broken to pieces, but he on whom the stone falls will be crushed. So in other words, if you fall on the stone, you can, and you fail, you can be broken. But if the stone actually falls on you, you will be crushed. So that's the worst punishment. many people have fallen over the years and countries and nations, but on whom the stone falls because they just refuse to follow, then the stone falls on them and they are crushed.
Okay, bring that down to a personal basis of today, within our world today. Take the two concepts that Joe just brought to us. Either a person, you fall on the stone, or the stone falls on you. What symbolism do we have here? Yes, go ahead, Paul. There, Don has it there. Thank you, Don.
Looking at the term of the stone crushed or stumbled, redemption versus judgment.
Yes, exactly right. If we stumble over the stone, if we fall on the stone, this is a repentant view. We come to Christ, the stone, the rock, and we are coming in a broken spirit. We come with humility, we are seeking redemption, but if the stone falls on the person, and whoever was just said about that is the fact that that is a case where they're being crushed or judged. I like that, and that's exactly what the point is. Yes, Fern, please. Over here, dear. Take your time. Don't upset Bob there.
Well, I think the thing that was so frightening to him was that the horn was falling on the holy ones and crushing them. And that was terrifying him until the kingdom of God came and redeemed them, and then they were all saved. So
exactly,
that's a terrifying thought.
Yes, exactly right. And Fern, before you run away, is that also a possibility looking ahead toward the end time, the actual end time? Is that a possibility?
You mean like in our time?
Yes, in our time.
Yes, it's happening all the time.
Absolutely.
Christians are being crushed and devoured, but it's not the final judgment.
That's
God's
right.
going to be confidently ruling.
That's right.
At the end.
There will still be the great rock coming down and just crushing. Exactly right. Yes. Okay. Now, another thought I want you to think about in terms of the kingdom, the eternal kingdom. You're in Matthew, I think some of you are anyway. Go to Matthew 6. And in Matthew 6, I think you'll find the prayer of the Lord. The Lord is giving the Lord's Prayer. Is there reference in chapter 6? Is there reference to the is there reference to the kingdom? Is it the same kingdom that Daniel is referring to here? That's all I'm asking you to think about. Go to chapter 6 and go down around about verse 9 and 10, right in there. Read that and then tell me, do you think it's the same kingdom that Daniel was referring to, the eternal kingdom? Anyone have a thought on that? Right here, she has a thought, right here. Right in front of Bob.
I think where it says, thy kingdom come, thy will be done. I think what we're saying is, even so, come Lord Jesus, vindicate your holy name, set the nation straight, and rule with the rod of iron.
Exactly right. Exactly right. That is well said. I like that. And I think the reference here, what I was trying to get you to think about, and I want you to think about, is the kingdom that Daniel's referring to, that same kingdom Christ is using in his prayer and teaching us the Lord's Prayer? And the answer is yes, it is. And it's all what you're saying, and what Fern said there too, and very well said. Now let's move on here a little bit. Now let's go to a question I have regarding the kingdom. We say it's an eternal kingdom, but is there a time frame on the eventual eternal kingdom? You follow that silly question? If we're talking eternity, you say there's no time, and I agree with you. But in terms of setting up the kingdom, what precedes the eternal nature of the kingdom? Is there a kingdom before the eternal kingdom? Fern?
Well, would it be the 1,000 years?
Yes, exactly right. The millennial period. Exactly right. That is exactly right. And we find that over in, oh my goodness, I've got to think where it is. It's in Revelation 19. Let's look in Revelation 19 once real quick. I think that's where it is. Revelation 19, and let's see. Oh, Possibly I'm wrong on that. Okay? Someone help me out.
Oh, 27 when 1,000 years are over?
Yes, okay, there you go. Very good. Read that for me, please.
When the 1,000 years are over, Satan will be released from his prison and will go out to deceive the nations in the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them for battle. In number they are like the sand on the seashore.
Okay, but also in there somewhere it talks about the eternal kingdom being established on the earth, the new heaven and the new earth. That's the kingdom that will last for all eternity.
21 verse 1.
Thank you, 21:1. Thank you. Read that, will you please?
Then I saw a new heaven, a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth passed away, and there was no longer any sea. And I saw the holy city come down. Very good. Of course, kind of part of your question a little while ago, there will be another earthly kingdom, one world. Won't last very long, but that's coming prior to the millennial.
Right, well, exactly. Yes, well said. Yes, that's correct. Now let's go back to the statue again and look at the clay, the iron and the clay. Now, the iron and clay part, that's the base of the statue. What I want you to be thinking about here in terms of this is, does this frailty of this metal, iron and clay mix, and the stone comes and crushes that, does that crushing of the iron clay base have any effect on the total statue or on all the kingdoms of the world? Does that have any effect at all? Marge, you're shaking your head yes with a big smile. Go ahead, please.
Well, it's like the man who built his house upon sand. If you take out the base, the foundation, if the foundation's not strong, there's nothing else that can hold up.
That's correct. That's exactly right. If the base is destroyed, what's it going to stand on? That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Now, we now have taken care of the statue, the empires, and all that's going to happen here. Now let's look in 2:45. Let's take a look at 45 and see how Daniel's kind of bringing this all to a close. Look at verse 45. Someone read that for me out of Daniel 2:45.
Yeah, I do. Inasmuch as you saw that a stone was cut out of the mountains without hands, and that it crushed the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold, the great God has made known to the king what will take place in the future. So the dream is true, and its interpretation is trustworthy.
Very good. You notice what I want you to notice there, how Daniel now actually brings about a reverse order of the metals. He actually begins to look at it backwards, so to speak. And we find here, for instance, historically, if you actually look at the history of the nations back in that time, you find that the Silver Kingdom, Persia, absorbed the Neo-Babylonian religion and culture into its own and thus destroyed itself. Cyrus the Great, Persian Empire, claimed that the gods of Babylon invited him to actually liberate their kingdom from the emperors of the time who were very bad, and I can't pronounce their name. It's Nabonidus and Belshazzar were the two of the empire under Nebuchadnezzar. They were followers of Nebuchadnezzar. They were ruling Babylon, and they were very naughty. They were very bad. And they were terrible rulers. And Cyrus comes along, and he says, okay, what is happening here is Babylon is asking me to come in. Their gods are asking me to come in and take over and liberate the kingdom of Babylon. So there was the destruction from an inferior one up to a superior one. The inferior destroys the superior. And then along comes Alexander the Great. And he had an interesting thing about Alexander the Great, if you look at your history. Alexander the Great actually adopted the Greek culture, and he adapted the Greek culture to the Roman culture. And if you read those two empires and the history of those two great nations, you find a lot of transfer of ideas and even some of their gods and so on actually came from the Greek into the Roman Empire, and it was just becoming a mess, just a mix and a mess and weakening them. And the interesting thing I learned too is Rome never did not annihilate the religious or the philosophic or the cultural aspects of Greece and the Hellenistic Empire. They did not destroy them. They actually absorbed them, which actually helped to weaken them. With all the paganism and all the lifestyle and all that sort of thing, it caused the Empire of Rome to actually become multifaceted, to a point they diversed themselves so badly that they had nothing really to stand on of any solidity at all. There was nothing solid there for them, and so they eventually collapsed as well, and we already talked about that. Now, iron being the base of the statue, suggests the ability to smash and all that sort of thing. We realize again with Rome, one of the interesting things about the Roman Empire was Rome actually, though they had legions and legions of army, yet they actually did not destroy or conquer the world by might. They actually conquered it in what avenue? You historians, how did Rome actually conquer the world? They certainly sent out their armies, they certainly had their battles, but that wasn't the main emphasis. What was their main emphasis? And that's going to bring us down to contemporary times in the world. What's the methodology of today? We talk peace, we talk Cold War, we talk, remission for a while, but what is all taking place behind the scenes?
Are you talking about the method of government?
Yes.
Imperialistic?
Yes, or whatever. What's a good general word to describe the method of basically conquering?
I'm not sure. I can't answer your question, but I have read where the Romans ruled differently. And they established this thing about imperialism, which lives on to today. The imperialistic empire. The method that they governed, they sent their people in and set up a local ruler there. Whereas before, people would come in and defeat somebody and said, okay, we'll leave you guys alone as long as you keep sending us money every month.
Okay, okay.
But if you rebel, we're going to come in and crush you, in which they did. I mean, Judah began to make alliances with Egypt, and Nebuchadnezzar said, that's enough, we're going to come in and knock you guys off for good and take you in captivity. But Romans ruled with alliances. Romans rule imperialistically, and I've read where even today we have a imperialistic. I mean, that lives on. We have the Roman, the Great Britain, and the Dutch Empire, and all these empires that come down through history. The way they rule was different.
This is very true. Jim, go ahead.
Bob, is the word you're looking for diplomacy?
Yes, that's exactly the word I'm looking for. Diplomacy, another kind of a word we don't particularly like, is political. This idea here, this idea of diplomacy and politics and so on, that's really how Rome ruled. Rome actually tried and was successful in getting the world and conquering their world was through diplomacy and politics. Think about today. Think of the whole world, not just the United States. Think of the entire world. What's going on that is very similar to this idea right here? Imperialism, alliances, diplomacy, politics. One world. One world. One world idea. Federation, okay, good. That's a good start. Remember, it talks about, and we're going to read about this here in Daniel, it talks about the horns of the beast. The federation. Go ahead. Paul, please.
Just a quick thought.
Good.
That diplomacy works fine by the strongest to the weakest.
Yes.
When the strongness of that nation happens, the diplomacy goes south. Because when we talk of this imperialism, we'll crush you if you don't do this or you do something wrong.